This is the best framework for dealing with life's problems. So, growing up in South Carolina, one thing that I absolutely hated was when we had to cut the grass. Because living in South Carolina, depending on where you live, the yards are huge, especially when you compare them to here down in South Florida or any major or metropolitan area, right? Any major city, if you will. So, what would happen is that my dad, he'll wake up and then he'll wake us up early in the morning. And his reason for that was saying, well, if we can get it done before the sun comes up, at least you won't be so hot and sweaty and beat up by the sun, right? So as a result, he'll get us up early. So we'll get up, we'll put on some raggedy clothes and raggedy shoes, and then we'll go and we'll start cutting the front yard, right? And when we cut the yard, we'll then have to rake the leaves, put them in bags and all that stuff, right? And right before we would leave, he would tell us, all right, guys, now let's head to the backyard. And we would literally have to spend the next 2 to 3 hours doing the exact same thing with the backyard. And if memory serves me correctly, the backyard was worse than the front yard. So guys, it was hard and I did not like doing it. I would try to avoid it at all costs. I would try to go to the gym. I would try to find reasons to hang out with my buddies, pretend that I was sick, anything. And he would have to bribe us. So a lot of times what he would do is he would buy us Chinese food afterwards, which was fun. And I have to admit, even now when I look back on it, it is a great bonding memory that I have with me, my dad, and my brothers, to be honest. Now, here's the thing, right? Here's what's funny about that. I now have my own house that I own. And what I love doing is doing the yard. It is crazy, right? I love getting out there and whether it's cleaning things up or spraying bug spray because, we had a bad case of ants at one point. Like those things I take great pride in and it's fun to me. I love taking my son outside and sometimes just standing on the driveway. It's absolutely fun and it means a lot to me. And you have to stop and ask yourself, what was the difference? Where did everything change? Because at one point I hated doing the yard and now I love doing the yard. I'll even tell you this, I wish our yard was bigger so that way I have more reasons to get out there and start doing little things like cutting the grass, maybe planting flowers, or doing some decorations, right? All these things. The difference, the biggest transformation, the biggest change between then and now is that I own it. When you own your problems, you take a level of ownership with it that gets you involved, it gets you invested. But if you never own your problems, you're going to be like me when I was young, trying to avoid cutting the grass and finding every excuse not to go outside. And if I never went into do the yard, one, I'd be in trouble. But two, it probably wouldn't have gotten done. Like my dad, he could have, got out there and done it, but it would took him a lot longer. But it would took us, it would have been hard to say the least. So the absolute best framework to approach life problems is by taking ownership. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you 4 points as to why this is the case and the benefits of taking ownership for all the things that are going on in your life at this moment. So point number 1, and before I get into it, make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you can get more information like this. So point number 1, when you take ownership of your problems, you become more invested in the process. As I mentioned, anything that you've owned, right? Anything that you work hard for, you're going to find that you're going to be a lot more cautious with it, to be honest. I can remember when I was in high school, it was my 11th grade year. I remember that was when I first got a job, right? My first job ever. I was working at a grocery store. And I remember I was collecting these paychecks and I knew that school was around the corner. So I made sure that I didn't spend any money. And when it was about a week before school started, I told my dad, hey, I'm ready to go school shopping. I'm ready to buy some clothes. And what happened was I went and I bought my first pair of Jordans with my own money. And this was literally my first pair of Jordans ever, right? Like I was never gifted a pair. My dad never bought me a pair because they were too expensive. These were the first pair of Jordans I ever had. And what was beautiful about it is that I paid for it with my own money that I worked really, really hard for. So guess what? When I got those shoes, I took great care of them. They were immaculate for a couple years. There are times where I say, you know what? I'm not even going to wear these to school today. I'm going to wear some other shoes just because I know that if I keep wearing them, they may get messed up real easily, right? So I was very protective of these shoes. You see what happens when you get invested in something, right? When you own something, you're going to take ownership of it, and you're going to be more invested in the outcomes and the process as you're trying to see, how do I solve this problem, as you're trying to handle these problems that you may be going through. But if I was gifted those shoes, right, do you think I would have taken as great care of them? I don't think so. I would have took care of them, but not to the level that I did. And I'll even tell you this, I probably wouldn't have even remembered that I was given those pair of shoes the way that I remember them now, because the meaning behind it would have been totally different. When you're given things versus working hard for them, it doesn't have that same weight, right? When you invest with that sweat equity, as we call it, it takes a whole different meaning. And when you find yourself succeeding or accomplishing or solving the problems that you're solving, there's a transformation that happens within inside. You start to develop a growth mindset. And that is unbelievable. That is invaluable. That is something that you can't put a price tag on. So if you're not willing to own your problems, you're going to miss out on that valuable opportunity. Point number 2 as to why it's important and the benefits of owning your problems, right, is that you start to see your problems as stepping stones to becoming the person that you want to become, all right? So I want you guys to imagine this. I want you to imagine that you're going through a forest and you're trying to find, let's say, some treasure chest or some mythical thing, right? The things that we see in movies. And I want you to imagine that as you go behind these trees, you see that there's this great big crater in the middle, right? Like there's this big ditch. And on the other side, you see this treasure chest, right? The thing that you've been looking for. The only thing is there's not a bridge to get over there. So between you and this treasure, right, that you're looking for, it's 1,000 yards, right? So 10 football fields. And somehow, some way, you have to make it over there. And the only way that you can make it over there is by building a bridge. To become the person that you want to be, to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish, there has to be a bridge that we make to get to that point. And this bridge can only be created by taking accountability, by taking the actions that we need to take, by looking at problems as opportunities, right? Opportunities for growth. That is the only way we're going to build this bridge to get to this other side of the mountain, this other side of the ditch, if you will. So again, what is it that I'm trying to say? Well, if you looked at each problem as an opportunity for growth, you start to see problems as a blessing. You start to see problems, again, as an opportunity to upgrade, to level up your thinking, your mindset, your skill set, so many different things. And when you do that, you make it very hard for someone to, whether it's, let's say beat you in a competition. So if we're literally talking about sports, right? Or I can even say when it comes to business, someone to, take your business out, right? As a competitor. I can say like a lot of things when it comes to that. But if you're not willing to put in that work, it's going to be hard to actually overcome some of the obstacles that naturally we're going to face. So imagine trying to get to that other side of the canyon or the ditch without a bridge. It'd be pretty impossible, wouldn't it? All right, point number 3. So what happens when you take ownership of your problems? Well, it gives you a sense of control, which leads to a sense of fulfillment. So there's this term that we use as therapists, and it's called self-efficacy, okay? Self-efficacy. So I'll tell you what it means. So self-efficacy refers to your belief in your ability to accomplish a specific task or achieve a particular goal. All right, we're going to redo that point. Point number 3 as to why it's important to take ownership of your problems is that it gives you a sense of control, which leads to fulfillment. Now, something that I want to talk about is this term called self-efficacy. This is a term that we use as therapists. So self-efficacy, it refers to an individual's belief in their ability to accomplish a specific task or achieve a particular goal. So it's really like that, let's say, figure it outness that we have within us, right? It's like, do you have it within yourself to figure things out, to take control, to just simply make things happen, right? Because for a lot of people, they like to blame others for their problems. They like to blame other things, right? They don't like to take accountability. And what that does is it makes the problem still a problem. It keeps them still stuck with where they're at. Now, what self-efficacy also does is that it actually helps you to build your confidence. Now, when we raise our self-efficacy, right, it makes it easier for us in the future to take down tough tasks. So I want you to think about this like in a game of Mario. When you get that mushroom and you get bigger and it's harder for the little like monsters or dinosaurs or whatever they were to like kill you and things like that. It's the same way. It's these little power-ups that we get. But if you're trying to get through the whole game as that little tiny version of Mario, it's gonna be hard. I'm not gonna say impossible. It's gonna be hard for you to make it to the end of the game. So see tough things, see problems as power-ups in your life. Now also I wanna say this, self-efficacy. So what happens is that this idea of increasing our self-efficacy, it can have an influence on our behavior. So self-efficacy plays a significant role in determining the actions individuals choose to pursue, how much effort they put forth, and how long they persist in the face of challenges or obstacles. Okay? So I want you guys to hear what I'm saying. When you increase that level, so when you get that power up, it will help you to take down these tough beasts that are in your life. It will help you to accomplish some of these things that maybe we didn't think was possible maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. You know what? I'm willing to bet at this moment, you're living out the dreams that you wish for, that you prayed for 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And if I'm right about that, there's a good chance 2 years into the future, it's going to be the exact same thing, so long as you're taking ownership of your problems. And point number 4, the last point, and before I give it to you, make sure you subscribe to this channel. So point number 4, as to why it's important to take ownership of your problems, is because that it protects the relationships around you. So I want you to imagine that you have a friend or a loved one or even a coworker who is always blaming you for all the problems that are happening in their life. Would you want to hang out with them? Would you want to work with them? Would you want to stay in a loving relationship with them? I don't think so. I probably wouldn't, and I don't think you would either. But when you have someone that's willing to take ownership, to say that the buck stops with them, as we say, you're going to look at that person as a leader. You're going to look at that person with a little bit more respect because they're willing to take on blame, something that a lot of people tend to avoid. It takes a very strong person to admit when they're wrong, to say that they're sorry, right? It's because we're taking on a sense of pain that a lot of people say that, they don't want to feel, if you will. But that's why it's so important. Being in a relationship, you have to have empathy. You have to be able to look at the other person from their perspective. You have to be willing to be selfless. If you're able to do those things, you'll have lasting relationships in your life. But if you're someone who can never be wrong, if you're someone who doesn't like to be critiqued, if you're someone who doesn't think their ish stinks, if you will, then you may find yourself, unfortunately, by yourself. And that's why we want to make sure that we're taking ownership of our problems. So I'm going to summarize, again, these 4 main points as to why it's important to take accountability for the problems in your life, okay? And again, this podcast is all about having the best framework for approaching life problems. And that framework is taking ownership of the problems. And I'm going to tell you guys the 4 points that I made again as to why this is important. So the first main point that I made is that you become more invested in the process. Again, I gave an example about me buying my first pair of Jordans. This was something that meant a lot to me. And as a result, I took care of those shoes. Point number 2, you start to see problems as stepping stones to become the person that you want to be. Point number 3, it gives you a sense of control, which leads to a sense of fulfillment. Again, there's this word that I kept saying, self-efficacy, okay? Self-efficacy. I said that it's kind of like in the game of Mario when you're getting the power-ups, if you will. And then point number 4, it protects the relationships around you because no one wants to be with someone who doesn't think their ish doesn't stink. So this is Coach Wells. Thank you for checking out this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to it, and I'll see you later.